The dwarves had gotten their foothold in the valley, and were now moving south to clear the region of their mortal enemies, the orcs and goblins. They were made up of several factions, which would work both in the dwarves' favor and against them. The greenskins got in the first blow, attacking Iron Rock. The garrison there was outnumbered, so they positioned themselves below a drop in the terrain with miners on their flank. When the orcs drew near, the miners moved up to envelop them. The orcs countered the miners with one unit of spears and their bowmen, while the rest charged down into the main line of dwarves. Though they took heavy losses, the dwarves managed to stave off every attack. The orc commander remained, fighting alone against the dwarves. The miners, meanwhile, chased off the goblin archers. It looked like it would be a dwarf victory, but slowly the orcs rallied and returned to their commander, this time defeating the main dwarf line. In doing so, however, they took heavy losses. It came down to only 2 units on each side. The dwarves were divided, and the orcs chased away the archers. The one remaining unit hid beneath the lip of a hill, waiting for the orcs to come near. The orcs came, but they overwhelmed the dwarves, defeating them and taking Iron Rock. Birnoth had to move back to Bereg Dawesbag to keep them from advancing further, thus leaving their western cities vulnerable, which the orcs took advantage of as they attacked Stone Mine Tower along the river. The dwarf garrison used a similar strategy as before. But this time they were victorious. This freed up Birnoth to continue eastward to take on the weakened orc force at Iron Rock, and they defeated them. This, in turn, allowed King Thorogrim to move south from Black Crag and begin the campaign into the mountains of the south. He began with Valaya's Sorrow, taking it easily. Karak Eight Peaks was not so easy, so he laid siege, sending Kezador Dragonslayer forward to take Karak Azgal. Birnoth moved on the southern plains, starting with Bitterstone Mine, and then...
Grave news, my lord. Word is spreading across the land of a dark power rising in the northern wastes. The armies of chaos are on the move. They surely plan to invade the world of mortals once again. Prepare your defenses well, for the forces of chaos spare no one in their quest for bloodshed.
The forces of chaos were on the march, and would eventually reach the dwarven homeland. The dwarves would have to return home to defend against it. But they still had time. The forces of chaos would have to cross vast distances over rugged terrain, and several empires were still in their path. With any luck, those factions would stave them off, at least for a time. Possibly time enough for the dwarves to get the orcs off their back porch. So Birnoth dove south, taking Ekrund. He then moved on to Dragonhorn Mines, where he defeated 2 armies to take the settlement. He continued to develop his own skills as a swordsman, and as he did, an orc army slipped by and retook Ekrund, cutting off Birnoth's supplies. So he had to pull back to Bitterstone Mine and rebuild his forces. In the east, the orcs pulled the same strategy, hitting Black Crag and Karak Azul, and they took the Crooked Fang Fort. Dragonslayer and the king knew they had to deal with the problem, so they combined forces and took Karak Eight Peaks. Dringarek has defended itself, allowing the king and Dragonslayer to go after Karak Azul. When a threat came to their rear again, Thorogrim had to pull back to deal with it while Dragonslayer continued forward. Along the way, they defeated every orc army they came upon, taking no prisoners, until they had retaken their conquered lands. In the west, Birnoth again had to pull back to Dek Karaz, and there determined to defend against an orc invasion while the king conquered the east. The orcs moved in behind him, taking Stoneman Tower and Bitterstone Mine. At last, King Thorogrim determined on a new plan. Birnoth would continue to defend the north. Thorogrim would attack down the west, and Dragonslayer would attack down the east. Dragonslayer got himself into some trouble, coming upon a top-notch army that had consolidated into a mighty force. The dwarf army was forced to pull back behind the gates of Karak Azgal, where the orc army laid siege. Thorogrim now had to move fast. He needed to conquer the plains before Karak Azgal fell. He changed strategies again and moved on Bitterstone Mine while Birnoth moved on Black Crag. Thorgrim took Bitterstone while Byrnoth defeated the attack on Black Crag. But despite their speed, time was running out for Dragonslayer, as another orc army was on its way, so he emerged from the city and attacked their besiegers. They stretched out in a line defending their catapults. They needed to hold out long enough for reinforcements to come up behind them. The orcs attacked from two directions, and the dwarves bent aside of their line to protect their flanks. The orcs sent their raiders around the opposite side, surprising the dwarves out of the woods. Dragonslayer threw his only reserves at them, and the orcs assaulted from every angle. The battle was fierce across the entire front, but ultimately, the dwarves' attempt to escape failed. The orcs took the town, and the survivors of the dwarf army, including Dragonslayer himself, scattered. But a new hope arose back home. Zufbar, the dwarven clan who were neighbors to the north, joined the Confederation, and they were ready to join the fight.